Okay, today we're going to be doing roots and radicals. If you look at 8C5, the instructions actually say give the square root, and we're going to be doing the square root of 36. This symbol right here means square root of 36. The symbol itself is called a radical, but what it means is we are taking the square root of 36. What does that mean? The square root means what times itself gives you 36. So you have to think of a number, multiplied to itself gives you 36. 6 times itself gives you 36. Okay, so the other way we can say 6 times 6 is 6 squared. Square and square root are the opposite. 6 squared is 36. Square root is the opposite of squaring. So the square root of 36 is what times itself gives you 36, and that would be 6. 6 times itself gives you 36. Okay, the main thing I want you to know is that square root and squaring are the opposite. 6 squared is 36. The square root of 36 is 6, meaning 6 times itself, or 6 times 6, gives you 36. Look at 8C9. This means the square root of 64. What times itself gives you 64? What number times itself gives you 64? That would be 8, because 8 times itself, so 8 is the answer, but to show you why, because 8 times itself, or 8 squared, is 64. Squaring and square root are the opposites. So what times itself? 8 times itself gives you 64. Okay, now look at 8C number 10. Square root of 1. What times itself gives you 1? There's only, on all of these, there's only one choice. 1 times itself. 1 times 1 gives you 1. Now look at 8C number 11. Square root of 81. What times itself gives you 81? That would be 9, because 9 times itself. 9 times 9 is 81. Now look at 8C16. There's two different ways you can do these. You have the square root of 4 squared. I just told you that the square root and squaring are opposites, okay? So anytime you have opposites, they cancel each other out. Addition is the opposite of subtraction. Division is the opposite of multiplication. Square root is the opposite of squaring. So what happens is this square root and that square cancel each other out, and you're left with just what's under the radical, 4. I'm going to prove that to you. Why? The square root of 4 squared. I can go ahead and multiply out under the radical 4 squared. What is 4 squared? 4 squared is 16. 4 times 4, 16. So now you're saying the square root of 16. What times itself gives you 16? 4 times itself gives you 16. And see, we have the same answer. So going through this proves that the square root and the square cancel each other out. 8C17, square root of 11 squared. Again, the square root and the square cancel each other out to leave you with just this number here, 11. To prove that to you, the square root of 11 squared. 11 squared, that means 11 times 11, that would be the square root of 121. 11 times 11 is 121. Now you do the square root of 121. You're saying what times itself gives you 121? 11 times itself. That just proves to you that the square root, and the square cancel each other out, and that's how I show it to cancel them. I mark out the radical and I mark out the square, and then my answer is just that number right there. Now let's take that and go look at 8C18. Now we have the square root with the letter, square root of x squared. We have to take the principle of what I just told you, that the square root and the square are opposites and they cancel each other out. This cancels out that, and you're left with just what's under the radical x. Because x times itself is x squared, and that gives you what's under the radical. Now look at 8C19, square root of b squared. Again, the radical and the square cancel each other out, and you're left with just what's under the radical. Now look at 8C number 20. The big birthday cake had an area area of 36 square feet. Area is always in square units. If the cake was a square, how long was each side? The cake is a square. I always recommend drawing a picture when you can. What do we know about a square? All the sides are the same length in a square. Okay, so all of these sides are the same length in a square. The area is 36 square feet. Area represents what's on the inside, 36 square feet. How do we find the area of a rectangle, which a square is a special rectangle? How do we find the area of a rectangle? Base times height. So this times this gives me this. Well, if it's a square, we know that this side is the same as this side. So what times itself, because these two have to be the same. All four sides have to be the same. So what times itself gives you 36? 6. 6 feet, if this was 6 feet and this was 6 feet, then base times height. 6 feet for your base, 6 feet for your height. 6 times 6 is 36, and the area is always square feet. So that means how long was each side? 6 feet.